Ansible allows us to automate the configuration management of systems and add any number of clients as we wish to. However, have you ever wondered how complex this can get? Well, trust me guys, this gets very complex when you have large number of playbooks. So, how do you think Ansible makes it seem like a breeze? Well, that's by using the concept of Ansible Roles. So hi all, this is Sahiti from Edureka and I welcome you to this session on Ansible Roles. In this session guys, we'll focus on what are Ansible roles and how you can create and use them. So without any further ado, let's take a look at the topics for today's session. So the topics for today's session are as you can see on my screen. We'll start this session with an introduction to what is Ansible and then I'll talk about Ansible Playbooks. Now Ansible Playbooks is an important concept to understand because to create a role you should know how to write a playbook. After that, I'm going to talk about what are Ansible roles and then I'll show you how to create an Ansible role. Once you understand how to create an Ansible role, we'll look into the Ansible role directory structure and finally we'll look into the hands-on part where we'll install a main stack application using Ansible roles. So I hope I'm clear with the agenda guys. So before I start with the session, I would like to request all of you to subscribe to our Edureka YouTube channel to get daily notified on the top trending technologies. Also, if you're looking for an online training certification program in DevOps, then check out the link in the description box below. On that note, let's start with the first topic for today's session, that is what is Ansible. Ansible is an open source IT configuration management, deployment and orchestration tool which aims to provide large productivity gains to a wide variety of automation challenges. This tool is very simple to use, but yet it is very powerful to automate complex multi-tier IT application environments. So guys, if you have to understand Ansible, then Ansible is a configuration management, deployment and an orchestration tool and uses the push approach. So what I mean by push approach is that in push approach, it does not require any agent set up on individual nodes like the pull approach requires. Also, the push-based systems are completely synchronous and you can see the changes made instantaneously and can fix the system if the changes cause problem. So the push approach is where guys you do not require any agent set up on individual nodes. Whereas if you compare the push approach with the pull approach, I would say the pull works in a master-slave architecture which requires agent setup on all the slave nodes. Apart from that, the push-based systems are completely synchronous and you can see the changes made instantaneously and can fix the system if the changes cause a problem. So Ansible uses the push approach guys and is basically used for configuration management, deployment and orchestration. So I hope I'm clear with this point over here. So now that you have an idea about what is Ansible, let's look into the next topic for today's session, that is Ansible Playbooks. So if I have to define Ansible Playbooks for you, then Ansible Playbooks are the access points to Ansible provisioning and are written in the YAML format. So YAML is yet another markup language and this is the format that is used to write playbooks. Apart from that, Ansible Playbooks provide a way to deploy and configure remote servers on various environments. And on a higher level, you can understand that these playbooks are used to handle multi-tier rollouts and load balancing tasks for the servers. So guys, playbooks in Ansible are very simple. They're used for configuration files and can be also used in many applications where the data is being stored. They're written in the YAML format and it is basically a human-readable data serialization language. So since I've told you about Ansible Playbooks, let me consider a sample playbook to make you understand better. So the sample playbook that I'm going to consider is to start the Apache HTTPD program. As you can see on my screen, every Ansible's YAML file starts with 3 dashes in the starting. So those 3 dashes represent that it's a YAML file. So for nearly every YAML file, your file starts with a list. And each item in the list is a list of key value pairs, commonly called as a hash or a dictionary. Apart from that, one more important point that you have to consider while writing a YAML file is the indentation of this file. So guys, when you're writing YAML file or when you're practicing how to write playbooks, or maybe if you're writing a playbook to configure some file in Ansible, then remember that the indentation of YAML file is very, very important. So every YAML file, as I said before, starts with 3 dashes. And there's proper indentation for every item in the list. So as you can see on my screen, this is a sample playbook to start the Apache HTTPD program where we have 3 dashes that represents the start of the YAML file. And then we have few items in the list. So let's discuss each of these one by one. So starting with the 3 dashes, as I mentioned before, every YAML file starts with 3 dashes and that is the only significance of 3 dashes. These three dashes tell Ansible that it's a YAML file which is being written. After that comes the host. So the hosts are a list of one or more groups or host patterns separated by colons. So for each playbook, you get to choose which machines in your infrastructure to target and who is the remote user who's going to complete those tasks. So which machine in your infrastructure that you're going to target is the host. So to include the host in the Ansible inventory, what happens is that people generally use the IP addresses of the host machine, or you can give the name. So over here, as you can see, guys, my host name is web service. After that comes the variables. So Ansible uses the variables which are defined previously to enable more flexibility in playbooks and roles. So they can be used to loop through a set of given values, access various information like the host name of the system, and replace certain strings in templates with specific values. So as you can see on my screen, we have two variables over here, that is the HTTP port and the max clients, right? Now, one important thing that you have to remember over here is that, Ansible already defines a rich set of variables individual for each and every system. So whenever Ansible runs on a system, all the facts and the information about the system are gathered and are set as variables. But there's a rule for naming the variables. Variable name should be letters, numbers, and underscores, and variables should always start with a letter. So please remember these rules when you're defining variables in Ansible. After the variables comes the user. So user, as I had previously mentioned, will be the name of the user who is responsible for completing the task. So over here, I've mentioned the user to be as root. Now, after this is done, the next section that comes into the picture is the task section. So the task section, as the name suggests, allows you to break up bits of configuration policies into smaller files. Apart from this, the task includes the pull from the other files. So as you can see on my screen, I've mentioned the task name to be as ensure Apache is at the latest version, and I've mentioned the command that can be used to complete the task. Similarly, I have another task that is write the Apache config file, and then I've mentioned the template name. After that, I've also used the notify directive in this particular task, and then I've mentioned a third task that is ensure Apache is running. So for that, I've used the service. So that's how, guys, you can declare tasks. Now after that comes the handlers. So handlers are again just like regular tasks in Ansible Playbook, but only run if the task contains a notify directive and also indicates that it has changed something. So for example, if a config file is changed, then the task referencing that config file may notify a service restart handler. So that's the reason you can use handlers. And then over here, as you can see on my screen, I've mentioned the name to be as restart Apache, and then I've used the service restart handler. So that was about this particular playbook, guys. I hope that you've understood how to create a playbook using the YAML format. You'll start with 3 dashes, and then you have a list of items, and all those little list of items will be put into a proper indentation format. So I hope I'm clear with this point. So if you want to understand more about Ansible Playbook, you can refer to our session on Ansible Playbooks. Apart from that, since this session is going to focus on Ansible roles, let's move on to what exactly are Ansible roles. So now moving forward with our next topic, that is Ansible roles. Ansible roles is a concept that deals with the ideas rather than events. So it's basically another level of abstraction used to organize the playbooks, and they provide a skeleton for an independent reusable collection of variables, tasks, templates, files, and modules which can be automatically loaded into the playbooks. So what's basically happening is that, the playbooks are a collection of roles, and every role has a specific functionality. Now, I'm sure by listening to these technical terms, you might not have got a good understanding about what are Ansible roles. So let me explain you with an example over here. Suppose you want your playbook to perform 10 different tasks on 5 different systems. Would you use a single playbook for this? Well, I would say no. Using a single playbook will make it more confusing, and obviously it will be more prone to blunders. So instead, what you can do is you can create 10 different roles where each role will perform one task. Then all you need to do is mention the name of the role inside the playbook to call them. So isn't that simple, guys? Instead of using a single playbook to perform 10 different tasks on 5 different systems, what you'll do is you'll just create 10 different roles, and those 10 different role names can be just mentioned inside the playbook to just call them. So that's how you can use Ansible roles, guys. Apart from this, there's also one advantage of Ansible roles, that is Ansible roles are independent of each other. So the execution of one role doesn't depend on the others, and hence they can be reused. Now, if you look at a large-scale industry, guys, this advantage gives many benefits to the users using Ansible. So with Ansible roles, you can modify and personalize these roles according to your requirements, And obviously this reduces our task to rewrite an entire section of the code every time we need it, thus simplifying our work. So if you just consider the example that I had taken before, we had written 10 roles for 10 different tasks. Now let's say you have to use 5 of them for another set of provisioning. Now do you think you have to write the entire playbook again? Well, I would say no. What you just have to do is you have to just reuse these 5 roles by calling them in this new playbook, and you can make the modifications required as per your requirement. It's very simple, right? So let's say, for example, you have to write a playbook for setting up 𝐴𝐼𝐶. Now for that, you have to create 4 roles, each for creating Linux, Apache, MongoDB, and PHP. Now in future, let's say you want another playbook for setting up 𝐴𝐼𝐶 as well as WordPress. Now instead of creating new roles for 𝐴𝐼𝐶 and WordPress, what you'll do is you'll just simply use the older roles, that is the roles used for 𝐴𝐼𝐶, and additionally you'll just create a new role for WordPress. So that's how, guys, you can use Ansible roles. So now that I've told you what are Ansible roles, let's understand how to create an Ansible role. So to create an Ansible role, a tool called Ansible 𝐂𝐝𝐿 comes bundled with Ansible. So over there, you just have to use the syntax that you can see on my screen, that is Ansible-𝐂𝐿 init, and then you have to mention the role name. For example, let's say you want to create a sample role name. So for that, you'll just type in Ansible-𝐂𝐿 init sample role name. So let me just show you how that happens. Now to create a role, what you initially have to do is you have to go to the Ansible directory. So for that, what you'll do is you'll type in cd/etc/Ansible. You'll go to this directory first and let's just list. So when you list, you'll see a directory of roles. So you'll go to roles. Now once I go to the rules part, I'll just list. So you'll see that we do not have any roles present. So to create a role, what you'll do is you'll type in the command sudo Ansible-𝐂𝐿 init, and then you'll mention the role name. So since we wanted to mention the role name as sample role name, I'll just mention sample role name, and then I'll click on enter. Once I click on enter, I'll just mention the password, and then I'll click on enter again. And once we click on enter again, you'll see an output that the role has been created successfully. So let's just wait for that to come. So as you can see on my screen, we can see that the sample role name was created successfully. So that's how, guys, you can create an Ansible role. So now that you know how to create an Ansible role, let's move forward and understand the directory structure of an Ansible role. So the directory structure of an Ansible role is, as you can see on my screen, we have defaults, files, handlers, meta, read.md, tasks, templates, tests, and vars. So talking about the defaults directory first. Well, the default directory contains all those default variables which are going to be used by this particular role. After that comes the files. The files contains those files which can be deployed by this role. So it contains the files that need to be sent to the host while configuring the role. After that comes the handlers. So the handlers contains the handlers which may be used by this role or even outside this particular role. After that comes the meta. So meta, as all of us know, defines the metadata for this role. So basically it contains all the files that establish the role dependencies. Moving forward, we have tasks. So task contains the main list of tasks that are to be executed by this particular role, and it contains a YAML file for that particular role itself. Now after that, we have templates. So templates contains those files which can be modified and added to the host being provisioned. So Jinja 2 is a template language which is used to achieve these modifications. After that comes the test. So the test directory is basically used to include the testing part in Ansible Playbooks. So when you define a role, you have a test directory, and this particular test directory is used to achieve the test for that particular role. After that, we have the vars. So this directory contains the other variables that are going to be used by the role. So these variables can be defined in your playbook, but it's a good habit that you define them in this particular section. So now that I've given you an overview of a directory structure, let me open the directory structure of the Ansible role that I had created. I'll just go to sample role name and I'll list. So once I list, you'll see all the directories that I'd mentioned before. So that was about the directory structure, guys. Now let's move on to our hands-on part where we'll install a mean stack application using Ansible role. So to install a mean stack application using Ansible role, we'll be just executing a single playbook, and then we will have 3 roles. One to install the prerequisites, one to install MongoDB, and one to install Node.js. So I hope I'm clear. We just have one playbook and we'll have 3 different roles, that is to install prerequisites, MongoDB and Node.js. So without any further ado, let's move on with the hands-on part. So to start with the hands-on part, what we have to do is we have to initially create 3 roles. That is the prerequisites, the MongoDB and Node.js. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my screen. I'll just come out of this particular section and then I'll use the same command to create a role. And then I'll mention prerequisites. And then I'll click on enter. Similarly, I'll create for MongoDB. And then I'll create for Node.js. So as you can see on my screen, we have created 3 roles, that is the prerequisites, the MongoDB and Node.js role. Now once your role has been created, our next step is to configure our roles. So to configure our roles, what you'll do is you'll go to your first role, that is the prerequisites role. So you'll go to prerequisites. And then you'll go to the task section of this particular role. And then you'll write a YAML file for this particular role. So to write a YAML file, you'll type in sudo vi main dot, let's say YAML. We'll mention YML and then click on enter. Now once you click on enter, you'll see that there's a file open where you have to mention the task for this particular role. Alright, so as you can see, our YAML file is open. So our initial prerequisite is to install Git. So for that, we have to mention a task in the prerequisites role to install the Git. So for that, what I'll do is I'll just copy paste from this particular section and then I'll show you how you can write it. So as you can see, I've started my YAML file with 3 dashes and then I've mentioned the task name to be as install Git. After that, I'm using the app modules so that we install Git using the app module, and then I've mentioned the name to be as Git. So the state will be present, which means that Ansible will try to install it only if it doesn't exist. And after that, I've also mentioned the update cache to be yes. So that is because we want to update the repository list before installing this package. So for that reason, I've mentioned update cache to be yes. After that, what I'll do is I'll just save this file and exit. Now once I save this file and exit, what you have to do is you have to go to a different file. That is, you have to configure your next role, that is your MongoDB role. So you'll come out of this particular role. Then you'll go to the MongoDB role. Again, what you'll do is you'll go to tasks. And then you'll create a file, sudo vi, let's say main.yaml. And now once the file opens, what you have to do is to install MongoDB. That is a task that you have to mention in MongoDB's role, is that you have to mention the task to import the MongoDB public key. Then you have to mention the task to add the MongoDB repository. After that, you have to mention the task to install MongoDB and finally check if the service is running or not. So for all of them, we'll define the task in the MongoDB role, right? So as you can see, our main.yaml file has opened up. So what I'll do is I'll just copy paste from this particular section again, and then I'll show you step by step what I've mentioned, right? So let me just copy paste. So as you can see on my screen, we have mentioned 4 tasks. The first task is to import the public key. The second task is to add the repository. The third task is to install MongoDB, and the fourth task is to check whether the service is running or not. So for that, I've mentioned start MongoDB. So talking about the first task first. So over here, if you see, I've mentioned the task name to be as MongoDB import public key. And then I'm using the app key Ansible module to manage the addition and removal of public key repositories. After that, I've mentioned the key server from where the public key has to be taken. And I've mentioned the ID of the public key. Now this gives us a very easy way to define which server we want to access and also which public key we want to import by giving the ID. Well, that was about the first task, guys. Now moving on to the second task, that is to add the repository. So to add a new repository, I've used the apt repository package. After that, I've mentioned the file name and the repository name. So this is basically the location where we are going to dump the repository content. After that, I've mentioned the state to be as present because we want to add the repository, and we have also set the update cache to be yes to force the repository update after the addition. Now once that is done, our third task is to install MongoDB. So to install MongoDB, I've mentioned the task name to be as MongoDB install MongoDB, and then I've used the app module. After that, I've used the name to be as MongoDB orgs. So this is from where we want to install MongoDB. the state to be as present, and update cached parameter to be as yes. Once that is done, we want to check whether it's working or not by starting it. So for that, I've mentioned the task name to be a start mongod, and I'm using the shell module to give the command. So after this is done, what you have to do is you just have to save your file. Now, once that is done, you have to configure your third role, that is the Node.js role. But before that, let me just clear the screen. Now what I'll do is I'll just come out of this MongoDB role, and then I'll go to the Node.js role. Similarly, I'll go to task section again, that is the task directory in this particular role. Right, and then again I'll create a YAML file. So for that, I'll mention sudo vi main.yaml. Right, and then what I'll do is I'll just copy paste from this particular section, and I'll show you what all tasks that we are performing in this particular section. So as you can see on my screen, we've mentioned the different tasks in the Node.js role. For the Node.js role, we have various tasks like to get the script and then to set the execution permission to the script. After that, we have to execute the installation script and then finally remove the installation script. Once that is done, we'll install Node.js and then we'll install npm, and finally we'll install the bower and the gulp globally. So starting with the first task, that is to get the script. So to get the script, I've used the get URL module. I've mentioned the URL from where you have to get the URL, and then I've also mentioned the destination where this URL has to be placed, basically where the data has to be placed. Now after that is done, our next task is to set the execution permission to this particular script. So for that, I'm using the file module where we'll mention the path from where the script has to be taken and the mode to be as u+x. So that means that we're setting the permissions to execute the script. After that, we have to execute the installation script. So to execute the installation script, I've used the shell module where I've mentioned the command from where the script has to be executed. Once the script has been executed, the next thing is that you have to remove that particular script. You have to remove the installation script because you no more need it. So for that, I'm again using the file module, and in that I've mentioned the path from where you can find the script and the state to be as absent. Now after that is done, what you have to do is you have to install Node.js. To install Node.js, I've created another task, that is to install Node.js. And I'm using the apt module where I've mentioned the name to be as item, the state to be present, and update cache to be as yes. And then I'm also using the with items parameters. The with items parameter works as a for loop. So a task will be executed for each element which is inside the with items parameters. So this particular task, that is to install Node.js, will be executed for the build essential and the Node.js parameters. And once the Node.js is installed, what we want to do is we want to install npm. So to install npm, what I've done is I've mentioned the task name to be as install npm, and then what I've done is I've used the app module to install npm, and then I've mentioned the state to be as present. Once that is done, we have to install the bower and the gulp globally. Well, these packages need to be installed globally. So for that, we'll again use the with items parameter to run as a for loop, and then we'll mention both the bower and the gulp. Apart from that, we've mentioned global to be as yes because we want to install it globally, and the state to be as present. Once that is done, what you'll do is you'll just save this file and exit. Now, once this step is done, that means that all your roles are configured. So what you can do is you can just come out of all these roles. That is, you can just come out of the Node.js role. And then what you have to do is you have to create a playbook so that you execute all these roles. So for that, what you'll do is you'll just come out of this roles directory again. And then let's say, we create a playbook over here in the etc/Ansible directory. Let's say we mention sudo vi, let's say mean stack.yaml, and then I click on enter. Now once I click on enter, our YAML file will open. So what I'll do is I'll just copy from this section and then you'll paste it over here. So once you paste it over here, what you see is that I've created a playbook in a YAML format because it starts with 3 dashes, and then I've mentioned the host to be as all, become to be true, and then I've mentioned vars. So vars are all the variables required during the installation, so that will be taken from the vars directory. Ansible become passed Edureka because that is the password for Edureka. The var node to be temp, and then I've mentioned the roles name, that is the prerequisites, MongoDB, and Node.js. So those are the 3 roles that I've created which have various tasks beneath them. After that, what I'll do is I'll just save this file and I'll click on enter. Now once I click on enter, before you execute this playbook, what you have to do is you have to go to your slave machine, and let me just open my slave machine. In that, you have to open your terminal. And over here, what you have to do is, it may happen that, your key that you're using, that is to import the MongoDB, has been expired or maybe it has been updated lately, right? So you have to give the update action on the slave machine. So you'll just mention this command sudo apt key list grep expired, right? And then you'll just execute, right? After that, you'll just mention the Edureka password. Now this is to basically check that whether your key that you're importing for MongoDB has been expired or not. So it says that, it has been expired on 2019 2/11. So for that, what you have to do is you have to update it. So you'll mention sudo apt key adv space double hyphen key server hkp key server dot ubuntu.com:80 space -recv -0x-d68 fa50 fea 312927, right? And then you'll click on enter. Now once you click on enter, you can see that it's getting executed. So let's just wait for it to execute, and then what you have to do is you have to remove the locks. We have seen that it has been executed and the total number of processed are 1. Now what you have to do is you have to mention sudo su. Now once you mention sudo su, what you have to do is you have to go to this directory of cd/var/lib/dpkg, right? And click on enter. Now once you click on enter, what you have to do is you have to remove the logs from this particular section, right? So you'll just list the logs, right? Now once you list the logs, you see 2 logs, that is log and log frontend. So for that, what I'll do is I'll just mention remove, and then I'll mention log hyphen frontend, right? And I'll click on enter. Similarly, I'll mention remove log, right? And then I'll list again. Now once I list again, you see that the logs have been removed. Now what you have to do is you have to go back to your master machine, and then you have to run this command of sudo ansible playbook, and then you'll mention /etc/ansible, and then you'll mention mean stack.yaml, and you'll mention -k. After that, you'll click on enter. Now over here, just mention the password and click on enter again. You'll see that all the tasks are getting gathered. So you'll just continue with yes. Now once you mention the password and then you see that all the facts are getting gathered, the first task that you see executing is from the prerequisites role to install Git. Now over here, you can clearly see that we see a status of change. Similarly happens for MongoDB stars, where we see that all the tasks are getting executed one by one. And finally, once all the tasks are getting executed, you'll see that the state of all the tasks has been changed. So that's how, guys, basically you can install a mean stack application using Ansible Roles. So in this particular hands-on, we have installed the mean stack application using 3 roles, that is the prerequisites, MongoDB and Node.js, and then we used a single playbook. With that, we come to an end to this particular session today. I hope you found it informative. So if you have any further queries related to the session, please comment down in the comment section below. Until then, that's all from my side today. I hope you found it informative. Thank you and have a great day.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!